Welcome to Once You Know. I'm your host, Amy Shaw. I'm a multi-million-dollar business builder, spiritual mentor, and a woman with a foot in both worlds. This isn't a traditional podcast. It's a new way of being part of a conversation. I believe there is no spiritual hierarchy. I walk the path as I lead by learning, evolving, and sharing what reveals itself along the way. This space isn't about teaching from above, but sitting together in real conversations as we make sense of growth, healing, and consciousness in real time. Here, conversations unfold naturally with spiritual people on their mission, different founders, leaders, creators, and visionaries navigating alignment while building lives and businesses that reflect who they truly are. There is no scripts, no interviews, and no fixed questions. Just free-flowing conversations, the kind that happens when awareness meets honesty. It is like being in the room, listening as insight lands, perspective shifts, and understanding deepens, giving you language for the changes you're experiencing and clarity for what's unfolding in your life right now. This is where we talk about the parts of spirituality that aren't mainstream. Higher consciousness, unseen guidance, energetic mastery, and learning how to access your guides, your higher self, and the intelligence that exists beyond logic. We explore energetic architecture of becoming, identity evolution, relationship shifts, intuition, expansion, and inner recalibration that begins when alignment becomes a non-negotiable in your life. Beyond surface level spirituality, we move into the deeper work, activating higher consciousness tools, expanding energetic awareness, and reconnecting with the wisdom and power that has always been available within you. This space exists to help you expand your awareness, feel less alone in your evolution, and move through your journey with deeper trust and understanding. This is not polished, it is not performance, it is just real conversation about becoming. Welcome to Once You Know, because once you know, you know. So again, a massive welcome to everyone. This is episode 1 of Once You Know. This is typically not a podcast. I know it is on a podcast platform. However, this is more about real, honest conversations. And I guess for me, I lead from my own learned experiences in my journey. So I think there's such an over saturation of information, which can become really overwhelming. But I know that this journey that we are all on, that are starting to expand our consciousness and live a different way of living. There is so many conflicting information out there. So this is a really safe space that was created for conversations as they happen, perspectives to land as they come to it. So it's a really safe space where we can ask questions, but we can also understand things in real time. So as these things come to light, as these energetic shifts happen in the world, as we are forming this new earth, and as we are doing the healing work ourselves, this is a platform where we can start to be a part of a bigger conversation and then start to teach and guide. I really wanted to create something that is accessible to everyone. I think that was the main thing behind Once You Know, because obviously, I work with one-on-one clients, I do my business containers, and I do my spiritual mentor programs. However, I know that there is people that are wanting to dabble into it that are maybe not in a financial position to be able to do that work. So this is created as a bit of an extension of my soul work and my commitment to my mission here on earth, which is just allowing people to live more, to love themselves more, to anchor in their power, to strengthen their boundaries, and actually live this magical life. So for me, I have built, for people that don't know me, I have built many, many businesses on my own. So a little bit of a backstory around myself. I have been very career driven all of my life. As a young child, I started out quite entrepreneurial myself. I was a really big thinker, very visionary. I had imaginary friends. I had guides. I had a lot of things that other people weren't working with. So as time went on, I learned that people were like, that didn't happen. That's not true. Imaginary friends aren't actually with you in this experience that you're living. So over time, I started to shut off my gifts. I started to conform, and then started the validation of really wanting to hustle. So within that, I deeply, deeply love that version of my life, and I honor all of the steps that I had to be able to create the platforms and the businesses that I did. So a little bit of backstory about my career history. Once I was old enough to get on a plane and get outside of New Zealand, I did. I moved to Bondi, where I had a really beautiful experience of working at one of the cult stores in Australia at that time. It was exclusive. It was very hard to work for. There was parties every Friday night. The brands were throwing huge parties. It was a huge, fun, expensive, exciting party girl era of my life. But I got my first taste of being on the floor, of selling, of styling, of being able to put some of my creativity to use. And I really started to fall in love with fashion. So after that, I worked my way up as one of the youngest managers in the General Pants Bondi Junction store, which was a very high turnover store at that time. So worked my way through that company, which was a really great foothold. I had two incredible mentors, Travis and David, at the time that I worked under, who were really big thinkers. They thought about things outside of the box. So that was my first, I guess, taste of having a mentor and having a look at people without envy and going, what can you teach me in this lifetime? How can I learn under you to be able to offer what you are offering me? So that was a really beautiful experience. I deeply loved that part of my life. Then obviously I got itchy feet again, which ended me up in London, which was another really big culture change. It was really big on building community because we didn't know anyone there. We were on the other side of the world. There was this real freedom that came with being whoever you wanted to be outside of who you grew up to. So that was another magical part of my life. And I actually, at that time, worked for a billionaire who was setting up a beautiful store in Notting Hill. So again, that was my first taste of creating something from the ground up. It was very, very high end. It was couture. We did a lot of work with like Sex and the City, and some really beautiful things happened through that experience. But I learned how to open a store and not expect the clients just to come. So I spent a lot of time in that process building community, building relationships on the floor, starting to understand how to build value into the product that I was selling, because it was very, very expensive. It was all couture and one-offs. So yeah, that was another really great experience, which I did for 2 years. And then I traveled for around 6 months. So in that time, I partied, I lived my absolute best life. And I must say, yes, I don't drink now, and I deeply value my body. But that was some of the funnest times of my life. It was such a magical experience. I loved every single minute of traveling in a bikini for 6 months around pretty much all of the world, through Portugal, Spain, the Greek islands, Italy, everywhere. Honestly, there were so many places that we traveled through that time. So yeah, really, really wanted to live that full experience at that version of myself. Then when I came back to Australia, that is when I started working for the Glassons Group. So again, incredible retailers. Tim Glasson is one of the pioneers of the retail industry, and such a wonderful mentor. So I was very, very lucky to have some, again, incredible mentors in that space. Two sisters, Kylie and Christina, and also Tim Glasson. So I worked within that business. I started to go into their retail stores, and I was obviously a great seller. I was a great manager. I was really, really good at what I did. I went in, I changed all the stores, changed all the product, got everything working the way that it needed to be, and made that store incredibly profitable. So I went round and did it to each store, but I always said to them, I'm going to be a buyer. I'm going to be doing the buying for Australia. I kind of held that really, really strong every meeting I had, every career goal that I ticked through that company, which was a lot at that time, especially for my age in my 20s. So I was really, really driven to be able to work my way in, but because of my ADHD and possibly some learning disabilities, I wasn't going to do it the typical route. So I really attached to these mentors and really learnt from them, and I did a lot of work for those companies and to build into what it was today. So so then I obviously got into an opportunity where I pushed it and I said, look, I really am going to do that buying role now, or I'm going to have to look for another opportunity. So as grateful as I am, I got a really great opportunity there. I did one of those tests, which is, I think, is that big matrix test, or that's probably actually the wrong word, but I failed miserably. I thought I'd lost my opportunity as a buyer. And I remember Tim flying over from New Zealand saying, well, actually, yeah, that was horrendous. After the test, I actually got a call from the people asking if I want to read a writer, and I said, look, to be honest, it's not going to make any difference. I don't understand it. I teach myself my own system. So with a countdown clock, with my my neurodiverse brain and how I operate, I knew it was never going to do. So he flew over, long story short, said, well, I guess we can hire someone for the admin side. So that started my buying career at Glassons. I ended up being their brand manager, so would support all of the stores, the VM team, and also the buying department. So I did that for a long time, traveled the world, and really created or alongside others created this beautiful business to be more than just basics. It became a really big hub in Australia as fast fashion, and now it's really amplified again. It's been wonderful to watch the next level of evolution for that brand as well. So then after there, I handed in my notice and I was going to go out on my own. So obviously that was a really hard conversation to have because I had some really beautiful opportunities there. And it was really, really hard to do. But anyway, then I went out with $50,000 and a dream. I remember sitting down with my accountant who said to me, yep, I really, really recommend you don't open a retail store. 98% of businesses will fail in the first year. You will lose your savings. It is such a tough industry to break into. So, of course, I went back and thought, yeah, this is me. So I started Fro Tribe. It was just me. I worked 7 days a week for about 2 years. Monday to Friday. I renovated the store myself. I had about $50,000. So once I'd done my renovations and put bits and pieces up, I could afford about 2 racks of clothing. So after that, I had to really hustle. What I sold, I bought. I built relationships with the brand, paid really well, built a really good reputation for myself in the industry that people would work with me. So I had to pitch for all of the brands that I did. And that was by being visionary, by really stepping in my authentic power and pitching what I was going to create, which was a community. So I did that, and it became bigger than I could have ever imagined. We obviously ended up hiring staff. Then I integrated and released my own label within it, which obviously took off massively as well. So we're representing the best brands in Australia at that time, plus my own label, Refined Rebellion. So I was getting that made. I was shooting it. I was creating all my content. I was I'd learned everything that I'd done from negotiating with Tim to building visual merchandising to creating a community through my marketing and branding. So I really used all my skills to do that. So that was a really beautiful business. I was at Fashion Week all the time. I had my first son through that business, and then I got pregnant with my second. So after that is when I sold the business, which was really hard because it was like my first baby. I did it obviously before I had Alfie. So yeah, that was a really big release in my life. But the amount that I learned in myself, the amount of insecurities, the resilience, all of those emotions that came up when the name of yours is on the door. You have to keep it going. You have staff, you have obligations, you have rent that is due every week. That brings a different hustle to you, and especially in that retail game. If you have a bad season in terms of spring comes late, all of a sudden the product isn't right. So you've got to think, okay, well, I've got to think on my feet really quickly here. I've got to exit some of my stock to be able to get some additional stock. So you had to use so much. So through that time, I didn't know I was neurodiverse. So running a business was harder for me. But again, I used to see things outside of it. So I started to anchor in more of that creativity and starting to outsource the things that I wasn't as strong in. So that's what I always encourage everyone to do. It's such a big one to try and do it all. But actually, our brains have got different gifts that we can bring in. And we were creating leaky energy from doing things that our brain can't easily do or that we're not gifted at, we are actually spending so much time and energy building the wrong parts of our business. So after that, I sold that and I moved back to New Zealand, where I run a beautiful family company here in New Zealand. It is a real passion, and I get to use my creativity and work with some really incredible people. So there's such a big part of coming back to something that has been pre-created. It was a company that my father started 45 years ago, and he is a pioneer in his own way, has his own way of working things out, and has created a really beautiful legacy. So when me and my sister came on, we have obviously put our touch on it. We've changed it quite a lot in some ways, but kept that value and that strong business sense. So then obviously Liv, I have always been spiritual. I have always been very deep into my own personal growth, and that doesn't mean the tick list kind of personal growth. This was like the deeper inside healing that I really wanted to achieve in this lifetime. Once you have children, obviously things come to the surface. That was probably like a really big part for me. As I got married and as I had children, I realized that I had a lot of programming that I had to unlearn to be able to show up for the people around me that I did love. So that changed a huge part of me really dipping deeply back into my spiritual side. Back into my personal growth. So in that, obviously, I did my Reiki masters. I started to understand energy a little bit more. I started to understand my own patterning. Why was I anxious? Why was I seeking validation? Why was my nervous system so amped up for chaos, or that's where it felt comfortable? So I would bring chaos into my life. So I started looking at all the parts of my life and starting to think, well, actually, I'm starting to create a lot of this for myself. So moving out of that victim status to, oh, well, this happened because of this and that's that person's fault. Everything is a mirror of ourselves. So I started to slow down the accusations and looking at my life as a whole and saying, okay, well, actually, I was a part of that and I didn't heal that part, and my inner child reacts that way, and the rage comes from programming that happened in this situation. So that's where I started to really unpack and almost peel myself back like an onion. So again, I'd used emotional unavailability. I had used humor. I'd used things to keep people at arm's length because I was worried about rejection, or I wanted to be on top, or my ego was seeking validation from everything apart from myself. So then started my love journey, which I've talked about a bit online, but that was such a big one for me because as I started to love myself deeply, which I hadn't ever experienced myself because I was the spiritual one with an imaginary friend and different levels, I started to really actually value what I brought into the world, the connections that I had in this world, how I'd shown up. I took a lot of accountability of how I had become and the programming that I was then putting onto other people. So then I really started to deeply go into the deeper layers of myself and why I was the way I was. But more importantly, I was disconnected from my community. I was like eat, sleep, and repeat. I was like working hard, watching Netflix, getting frustrated at my kids because I was stressed out. My nervous system was always dysregulated and a bit cooked. So I was like, actually, no, I don't want to live like this anymore. But I'd used all my beautiful business knowledge that I had gathered over my lifespan to be able to create a spiritual agency, which is obviously Lurv. So again, that started as a wellness platform. It started with clean fashion, which was all linen, leaking no microplastics once we sweat. It was all it was all clean. But what I started to realize, the more work I did with my clients, is that actually there was such a deep need for education, which not from a pedestal, but education of like, this is actually possible. Like, you don't have to be disconnected. You don't have to be anxious. You don't have to feel depressed. You actually don't have to do the things that you hate doing. We have this one beautiful earth experience that we're here to do. And we wake up at the end and go, shit, I just worked, or this is what I just did. I didn't actually live to my full potential of who I was. And the most important thing for me, I realized I actually wasn't my true authentic self. I had learned how to put the masks on. I was like the fashion it girl, the cool girl, the one that was always helping everyone, over giving, seeking validation. So then I was like, well, I still want to help people. I've still got a really large capacity for helping people and being able to support people into it. But what I realized is I had to really like love myself first and live all of this experience myself so I could actually give learned experience. There's so much information online now around basic overviews of like, here's what you can do. This is what the energy's doing. Now, I believe in all of that, but everybody learns their lessons that they need at that time. So what you're going through will be completely different to somebody else. So it's all very well having an overarching strategy, but actually what you find is at different stages, for example, this year through the snake, I flourished. I did all of my main building of all of my businesses. I built the foundation for Lurv. I added the business containers and the mentoring program. That was my biggest year. And then I kind of hit the horse energy and all of these things surfaced. So all of these things came to the surface that I knew I couldn't take into this next energy. So if I was following, I guess, a blanket routine of what I should be doing, it wasn't actually relevant to the lived experience that I was doing at the moment. So I think it's really important to have conversations. Some of these conversations will resonate with you and they will be exactly where you need to be, and the universe will put you here to understand a little bit deeper. But then there's going to be other ones that's like, I'm not feeling that, but you might come back to this one and say, actually, no, you know what, I am having issues with the transformation period or the solitary or the isolation. So I'm going to label each one of them quite clearly. So if you are going through that, you can also go back and listen and say, actually, you know what, this is really relevant to me now. So this is going to be a really beautiful, almost like a manual, a safe space where you can constantly go back and listen to that lived experience. There will be solo episodes. There will be some with my clients that are comfortable to share their stories. There will be visionaries from our industry. There will be other spiritual mentors. There will be founders from business and how they put their business into alignment. So it's going to be a really beautiful mixed thing. As things come to life, I will obviously download them. I will put them into an episode, and then I will bring other people in that are sharing really beautiful experiences that I think is going to be really strong for my community. So it's going to be really beautiful. It's going to be really diverse. There's going to be a lot of different information, but it's from a lived experience. It's from people sitting together and talking. And I think now I can't talk about the weather. I can't talk about really anything basic now because my conversations are so deep. And I know a lot of my clients are like, I would love to be invited to those conversations. So I guess this is where Once You Know has been born, because I want everyone to be privy. I obviously am really busy. I run 2 businesses. I have one-on-one clients. I have all of my containers that I run. I have a podcast. I do retreats. There are so many beautiful parts of me that I'm so deeply honored for the work that I do. But this is one where I can just chuck it up, and then at least everybody's got the access to be able to get information in between, which sometimes can be hard for me to get back. I found, which I love doing, so many DMs, so many voicemails, so many voice notes, asking questions. So the idea of this one is on the Once You Know podcast Instagram page, send me a DM with what's going on. Send me topics that you would love me to cover. Send me things that are relevant in spiritual journeys or your healing journey so that we can address it, or we can do some Q&A. So again, it's a really open, expansive, beautiful container where we are all in it together. We are all learning from each other, but it creates a really beautiful safe space. So this is a bit of an introductory just on, I guess, the background of why this came to light. It won't probably be overly consistent. It's not going to be every 2 weeks at 7 p.m. It will be when it comes through, when it's channeled in, when the energy shifts, when I get enough information or my own lived experience that I feel it's really relevant to share. So this is going to be a really beautiful ride. I'm so excited. I've already got quite a few guests lined up who are really wonderful. Some of them are my mentors, some of them are in our industry, some are founders, and some are clients. So there's a really diverse range. Again, if you'd love to be on the podcast, please flick me a message. I've got quite a long list at the moment, but again, this is going to be a space where I want to be really consistent to be able to pass the information on. So this is going to be a really great one. We've got the next 2 episodes are really fabulous. I'm really, really excited them. One is about the cost of growth, which I think is a really important conversation that potentially we don't talk about enough, because there is a lot of grief and solitude that comes with it. But then on the flip side of it, you have this deep self-peace. You anchor in your boundaries. You are so sure of who you are that your life then starts to mirror it. You know, everyone probably says my life is easy, and my life is easy because for a long time it was very, very hard. It was very, very stagnant, and it was quite difficult. And now I find it is so much better. So again, last thing which I should probably cover is I am also a healer. I am a spiritual mentor, and I'm a Reiki master. So I also do a lot of education around activating your own gifts. So these conversations are going to go deep into things like your guides, your spirit family, people that have passed, your own gifts that you bring into this world, how to heal your body, how to use your energetic universal life force. I'm never sick. I heal myself from everything now. I'm not saying, again, it's the be-all, end-all, but it has made my vitality so much stronger. So, again, we're going to cover all those sorts of things. We're going to talk really, really deep as the season goes on around some gifts that we don't talk about in mainstream as well, and how to access those. So it's going to be a really beautiful ride. It's probably not for the faint-hearted. It is not your typical self-help or transformation podcast. This is a very lived experience and very high-level consciousness community that we want to build for everybody to be able to stand safely in it, feel safe, and expand their own gifts and consciousness, and allow what we came to be to unfold in a safe way, and give language for what sometimes doesn't make sense. So anyway, that is a little bit about Once You Know. We will drop the next episode very, very soon. And I can't wait to bring you along on this journey with the people that we have got involved in this project. And again, it's an extension of the work I do. It's an extension of my soul and the blueprint and what I came to offer the world. So I am deeply grateful for you listening to the first episode. And I promise you the next ones are going to be magic. Thank you.